friends of Jackson Elias. I love some of their discussions, but then there's this I find kind of, and I'm not adverse to cursing, but it's just I find it jarring to hear these British voices suddenly start cursing about stuff. I'm thinking, well, you're not really.
Yep, you should sound more sophisticated. You're British.
Wow, unless you're talking about politics or something, then I can see where you're swearing and cursing.
Okay, well, we're live. This is John from Sharp Mountain Games. And, usually it's just me talking, and that's okay, I guess. But I thought it'd be nice. So I have my friend Shannon Ferguson on with us here today. And he's going to be able, I think, to provide a little bit different perspective on maybe gaming in the 80s, especially in Canada, of all places. So let Shannon introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Shannon Ferguson. As John said, I live in Canada, born in Canada. I'm living in the same small town that I grew up in. So um, I guess I don't know if that's unique or it's been good for us. So it's been tough if you're a gamer and interested in tabletop RPGs, but other than that, life's pretty good. Retired now, so hopefully more gaming in the future.
Yeah, and Shannon and I are both teachers, so we have that in common. I teach science and he taught English, so um, it's a shame he's not at my school because he'd be right down the hallway from me. The chemistry and the and physics and the English are on the same floor, but go figure.
As they should be. As
Okay,
they should be.
so maybe you want to talk a little bit like how you got started in the. I'm assuming in the early '80s or somewhere in the mid '80s, and you're from a pretty small town. How many people? About 4,000 or a little more than that?
Yeah, probably when I was a kid, it was. I don't know. It's fluctuated over the years. We have the world's largest nuclear plant down the road, which I, despite the fact that my father worked there and everyone I knew, their parents worked there, I didn't really realize that till much later when somebody who came to the area and said like nobody ever sort of talks about this giant nuclear station. You're like, well, it's just part of life. But so yeah, it's fluctuated. I mean, we were probably I think it was around 7,000 when I
Okay.
was a kid, and then it's grown and shrunk, and now we've grown again. Yeah, I mean, and we're in the sense where we are. We're in a rural area, so we're about 3 hours sort of to the closest city. Um, and so, yeah, you asked about how we kind of got into it. I was trying to remember that my earliest recollection is sort of watching. I was over at a friend's, and his older brother and a friend were playing this game, and it was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I remember almost having that sort of epiphany of the like realizing that this game had no boundaries. There was no sort of set conditions to win. It could do anything, and that just I don't know. It really was sort of I don't know. It sounds strange, but it was just mind blowing to me as a kid that you could do anything. And again, I loved reading. I loved mysteries, so that the idea of delving into dungeons and finding out things appealed. Uh, I'm sure I had read or started reading The Lord of the Rings, so I mean that just fit right in. So it was like this combination of all these ideas, and I think too the idea that I mean, they were English, and again, there was almost a sense of needing to be an intellectual to understand Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and that appealed. Um, so yeah, I think that was the early on sort of beginning of how I got into gaming, and then of course I have a younger brother who's a couple years younger, so if I would drag him into it because you needed somebody to inflict your game on, and then just slowly it kind of branched out. We kind of knew kids that it just again it seemed strange maybe being a small town, and because of the power plant, we had families sort of from all over the place. Despite being a very rural area, I would say we had people from India and China and English, and so you had really a lot more contact with people from outside.
Hmm.
And our gaming group turned out to be kids that were, their parents owned a Chinese restaurant, and uh, other kids whose parents were, engineers out of the plant. So there was sort of this, again, just this group, male, female, and everyone just kind of, we just came together and started playing. And I think now I would look back and go, I was lucky to have that opportunity, but it just seemed chance that we had all that stuff around us.
Almost like a university town in some ways,
Yeah,
where you're going to have more varied people.
I think so. I think if it had been a strictly rural area, I think would have been even more difficult. Um, I was trying to think of, because the other thing was trying to get things. It was like there was no gaming shops, there was no Amazon, there was nothing like that, and we had a woman that opened up a bookstore, and she had all sorts of stuff, but she did bring in D&D, and I can't remember whether we kind of went in and said, "Hey,
Could you order this?
yeah," but I remember buying things like the deities and demigods and things like that as they came out, and then we had it was like a stationery store downtown, and they had magazines, and I remember them having Dragon magazine. So again, I think back and I think, why would they have had that? And it was strange. Outside that little group, I don't know anybody else. I mean, and I think that was part of it too. Is at that time you were sort of hidden away. You didn't want to express, this fascination, because you knew it was sort of, it was nerd culture.
Hmm.
Of course, as a kid, you never wanted to be a nerd. Um, but yeah, I don't know. There were things. The closest sort of city to us was a place called Owen Sound, and it was about 45 minutes away. And they had, a consumer distributing, which was like a catalog store. So you would go in, look through the catalog, write down the things you want, and then they would go back in the warehouse and bring it out. And so they would have, down there, then we were able to find stuff. But I don't remember game stores or anything like that. It just seemed to be more bookstores.
I didn't see my first game store until 1991, when I went to Pittsburgh for grad school.
Yeah, and I think I was the same. I was at university, and there was one on the corner, almost practically across the road from where I lived in Toronto. And again, kind of going in and realizing, and I think that was it too. That we knew Dungeons and Dragons. I had heard. I was trying to think of Tunnels and Trolls for sure, but I never saw a copy of it anywhere.
Me either.
Uh, Star Frontiers. So we did, and then through these other kids, we would get into things like Star Frontiers, James Bond, Top Secret, uh, Gamma World, like a lot of TSR products, maybe some Palladium. Someone had a Palladium book. So it was always, just different types of games and stuff. But yeah, I don't really remember seeing other sort of games other than the usual TSR one in much great quantities. So
And that's one thing I wonder too has changed. And I remember, again back in the '80s, that you were playing more varied things, but maybe you didn't have as many long running campaigns.
yeah,
Whereas nowadays it seems like it's switched, where everything is long running D&D campaigns, and that's fine. But but then you don't have the dipping your toe in the water to the other things as much.
yeah, and I mean that's true. I don't think as kids we had the ability to sort of sustain those.
Right.
I mean, maybe if we had played it a little bit more. I mean, and again, it's sort of one of my regrets that I just didn't continue playing in high school. And again, went to university, and I'm sure there was a game club somewhere. I never saw any. No, I mean, I think if I had seen a sign up on a bulletin board, I probably would have been tempted to go back into that. But by that time, you were kind of out. You didn't want to admit to anything, that you even had played or knew what it was. Um, and that was about the time second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons came out, and I kind of, I don't know, I kind of fell away from that. Although fantasy gaming is probably my preference. Yeah, I don't know. It was just again, just the timing, and but yeah, as kids, I mean, it was just, if you played James Bond, everyone was dead by the end of this, or the game session. If you played, we maybe had characters that we would carry on with D&D, but it was basically one shots with the same characters, and then you'd level up, and then the next time you were in the Tomb of Horrors or something like that. So.
Yeah, and then how did you get back into gaming, as an adult? Because I think your story is the same as all of us. You go to school, you get married, you have to have a job and kids, and you have to adult for a while. Like I'm thinking when my kids were really, really tiny and little, I wouldn't have had even the energy some days to do that.
Yeah, no, I think I remember trying to start another, because we luckily had kept all our materials, and it was all sort of at my parents' house. And I'm sure I might have been just starting teaching, very, 20 something years old, coming across the books, looking through them and thinking, well, now I'm settled, and trying to get the few people, most of the kids that I had known were gone, like they'd all moved away, or, were still at school. And I tried to get a group, and I think we played one session of advanced D&D, and again, it was just trying to relearn the rules, and again, rediscovering the rules as you're going back into it and kind of going, oh, that's, now I understand how initiative works, or now, oh, I understand how AC works better. But so I think there was that attempt, and I think my brother played, and of course he's always sort of, we got to do this more, and that kind of stopped. And then I don't think it was to almost, I'm trying to think when I started listening to Save or Die?
It used to be Save or Die, and then now it's Save for Half.
Yeah, with Mike, Liz, and Glenn.
Right, and Save or Die may still there was a creative difference and they split.
Right.
From what I understand. I mean, I don't know any of the details. I don't think there was a fight or anything. I think they just split into two different podcasts.
Yeah, and there was the other one that Vince hosted. That was
There was an AD&D one, yeah.
So I think it was that podcast that kind of, again, I don't know how I found out about it. Maybe it was just a Google search. Here were people talking about the games I love, so I started listening to it. And then with the advent of Roll20, it kind of, the possibilities of gaming anytime, anywhere, with anybody. Again, it was one of those sort of, like another epiphany was, even though I'm still in this remote kind of area, I can get online and play with people from around the world, and I have. So that would have been maybe early 2000s, I think, when I started listening to that. I was looking at my Roll20 account. I think I've been on it for almost 12 years.
Okay.
Or more. So I think it was that, and then because you were a contributor to that podcast, this mysterious T-Man would write in and talk, and I wanted to try and run a game. I think because Mike and Liz always talked about basic, but they weren't really in a basic game, and I offered up to run a couple sessions with them. So there was Liz, Mike, Jim Wampler, Glenn Holstrom, and then a gentleman from Britain, Reiner Bjorkson or something. He was Doc Mindwipe was his handle, and he would, of course, he'd be playing in the middle of the night. I don't know how he did it, but so that was again sort of starting to run games for people, and then, like I said, I think you contacted me, and then I joined your group.
Yeah, through the Basic Fantasy forums. I'm pretty sure that's where it was.
Yeah, and then there was that, and that this is really the thing too that kind of put me back was always aspects of advanced D&D and basic D&D that I liked, but then there was a lot of stuff I didn't like. Advanced, I always sort of found there were so many esoteric little rules. I remember getting into let's say a debate with a gentleman that I think he was a host at one time on Vince's show, and I said, well, nobody runs AD&D fully rules as written. I mean, it's impossible. And he kind of came at me and said, you're an idiot. I do it by the book, and I'm like, that's great. I never want to play in your game because it would just be too crunchy. But again, and I'm not sure how I found out about this, whether it was through you or somewhere else, or maybe Mike and Liz talked a bit about it. And when I found this basic fantasy role playing game, I was like, this is it. This is the perfect system. It has the best of all worlds. It's got the modern sort of. Oh, and I did play. No, and I did play 3.5. My brother had friends down in another city, and we would go down once a year and play a game of 3.5. So I kind of got into that for a bit. Bought all the books. I found a guy here locally that played Pathfinder and played a couple games with him. And I thought, okay, well, this is perfect. This is the game. And then I found those games were too confused. There's just so much little minutia. So when I found basic fantasy, I was just like, that's it. There's my forever game. And it's free. It's cheap. There's tons of modules, tons of house rule kind of things that Chris Gonerman and the crew do. So I was just like, that's it. I don't need to buy another game ever.
No, you really don't. I have the fourth edition, and the thing is, people say, well, it doesn't have this or doesn't have that. And same could be for any of the retro clones, but well, put it in. You can put it in without breaking anything. Like we were talking last night about the old like your background. I don't know exactly how Gary said, like you grew up as a fisherman or you grew up as a carpenter. Well, you can just write that in on the bottom of your BFRPG sheet, and the game master could say, okay, well, yeah, carpentry, you'd probably be able to notice something about the beams in this tunnel or something.
And there might even be, I can't even remember if there is. I'm sure there's somewhere on the BFRPG site, backgrounds. I think that was the other thing was it took a while to sort of, or at least for me to sort of say, I have permission to do that. I have, because you try to tweak it, and again, it's sort of like, it's not really the official rule. And that's hard too if you're playing with new people and you sort of say, well, I'm playing this game, but here are all my house rules. And again, I think I would be like, oh, okay, well,
right.
Now I've got to learn all this other set of rules. I did pull another one, and I have it. This is a self-printed copy of the Shadow Dark.
Okay.
The new RPG.
Mm-hmm.
I forget her name.
Kelsey something or other.
Yeah, and Kelsey Dion.
Okay.
And I have to admit that it's sort of funny. I think I find that game because as you guys have indulged me in 5E Dungeons and Dragons. Again, a game I thought, oh, this is it. This is the perfect version of the game. I started playing that because, as you've done, we started a gaming group at our schools. I started one. I had some grade 9 students approach me and sort of say, "Are you Mr. Ferguson?" I said, "Yeah." "Have you ever heard of a game called Dungeons and Dragons?" And I'm like, "Gentlemen,
okay,
come with me." But they played 5e, and I'd never played it, so I quickly went out, bought the books, learned the rules, because as you found, you tend to be the game master. So, and again, I like that rule set. I love some of the simple modifications that it makes, like advantage and disadvantage. I like the way I was never a big fan of Fancy and Magic, the Fire and Forget. I do like the idea of, again, we've tried other game systems like DCC, Dungeon Crawls Classics, and I like that idea of rolling for it, and we've played that. I find that there's aspects of that game that I really like. but the spell tables kind of, I find, slow the game down a little too much.
Yeah, I think I'm wondering too, like if you were only a DC, like if we were only a DCC group, if it would be, you'd get used to it.
And if everyone had a copy of the rules,
You're
so
right.
if I was gonna play a wizard, I would have my spells ready, and I'm gonna cast this, and as a game master, I just sit back and go, okay.
Yeah, as it is, it does put a lot of work on the dungeon master.
So, and this is what I liked about Shadow Dark was it has that you roll to cast. If you don't meet the target, you lose the spell. If you get a one, there's some sort of
A backfire or something.
yeah, exactly. If you hit a 20, you can double things. And I kind of like that. It kept the I think the magic users interesting and clerics, but it's simple. You still get some, every other level you get a chance to kind of modify your character. So everyone, if we both had fighters as we continue, we could be completely different. Like one, you can say, well, I want to be more like a Legolas type fighter, and I want to be more like Conan. You can kind of diverge yourselves, and then whatever because it's random, whatever bonuses you roll can add to that sort of differences. So I kind of like it. It's even more sort of terse than basic fantasy, and I was running it for. I kind of said to my students, look, I bought this on Kickstarter. I'd like to try it. So we played the last few sessions at the high school with the rules. Again, I think it probably plays better with old school players. I found 5e players kind of they want well how I want to do this. I want it like how do I make my sword into a blood sword and then I'll use the energy and I'm like you can't. Well, or you can't yet, right? Um, so I'm kind of keen on trying it out a little bit more with us. So I mean that's our issue. So we have lots of fantasy,
Right.
and I'm the fantasy guy. I think you're more sort of science fiction,
Yeah.
and yet you're running the fantasy game, and I'm gonna run. I'm gonna try and run Star Frontiers again for us. So um, it's just, but again, it's as you say. The nice thing with us is we've got that core group. It's every week. We've done back and forth, switching back and forth.
Yes, and I appreciate it. And then another player in our group has also sat in and done some DMing when I've needed a break, and that's maybe for this, if I can just for DMs and GMs, it's okay to ask for a break once in a while.
Oh yeah.
Because otherwise you get I don't want to say you get sick of it because I love it, but you need to step back.
Well, and you need to have time to generate those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's part of it too. Um, I'm always sort of an advocate that it shouldn't all be on you as a GM to you're not here to entertain us, right? You're here to maybe set some interesting problems in our way, and then I mean even last night I enjoyed our game where completely different, and I don't know whether you sort of thought
I didn't know how that was going to go over. What I just for the listeners, what I did was they need to go to an enemy town because they're going to meet with like an agent, a secret agent, sorta, or a diplomat. So they were going to go in disguised as entertainers, but I didn't, like an entertaining troupe. But I didn't say, oh, well, you're going to be the dancer, you're going to be the singer, you're going to do the magic. I just kind of said, this is your mission to go and you decide. And I did very little talking last night. I told yep, and that's good. That's wonderful.
yeah, like that to me is if you're a GM, that's you truly are a master.
Wow.
Because I think again it's sort of like permission to change rules. I think it's sometimes hard for I know and as teachers, right? I mean, those uncomfortable silences can sometimes be they're the scariest I think for teachers, and yet you kind of have to give your players and your students those spaces and just to sit back. A teacher I really admired was great at that, where he would come in and just write a word on the in those days the chalkboard, and then he would go and do attendance, and we would sit there and go, okay, why did he write that? What's that? How's that connected to the stuff we're reading? And to me, that's like walking a tightrope. Like, you don't know how that's gonna go, but you're okay with it, right? You're comfortable enough. And I think that's like last night was perfect because, yeah, as you say, there was nothing on our character sheets that said, well, I'm going to be, my character is a barbarian who has, a -1 in charisma. And I decided that she was going to be the skald, the bard, right? And it was a blast. And it was completely, normally she's the one that's like, when can I kill something? Something needs to die right now. And it was fun to sort of just switch it up and do something. Yeah, there isn't a skill on my character sheet to allow me to do these things, but we do them, right? And I think that's really old school. Like, I think that to me is the ability, and I think that's where the difference is. And it's not to put down newer players. I just don't think they've had that
experience.
And I think for us, growing up, as we said, before the internet, before all the YouTube channels and podcasts, you might have, if you didn't know how something worked, you might have got an answer in, say, Dragon Magazine. But most of the time, it was like, I don't know how this is going to work. You might have discussed it with the people at the table and made, okay, well, that's how we'll run psionics, or this is how we'll run skill checks in Top Secret, and then that's sort of your rules. So, back to the idea that you aren't the entertainer, right? I think that's important for players to kind of really, you've got to pick up that other end of the stick. I always found that strange when people talked about, I set out this, you meet in a tavern, the farmer runs in, the goblins kidnap my daughter, and people say, well, I'm just going to order another drink. I don't care. And I'm like,
right.
That's the hook, man. Like, he's, you gotta bite on that and go with it. And yeah, okay, is it cliche? Yeah, but show me a story that's original.
Right. Right. Disguising as entertainers. I know that's not original. I can think of at least two other stories right off the top of my head that use that somehow.
I just, the new D&D movie, right, where the bard comes out and he's singing
right.
away. I'm like, there it is. There's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and dazzle these people with whatever, and the failing is the fun part. I was lucky, and I mean, that's the other thing I love is rolling dice. I love that random nature because that takes us, again, if I had failed those checks, then it would have been interesting as well.
They might have chased you guys out of town or had a little combat or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, and then we're the worst entertainers. Right? We come up with another reason why, that's why we're up this lonely road is because we've been chased out of every other town around, right? So.
Now here's something. I don't want to move you off that topic.
No.
Yep, but just
you have to, as you say, herd cats. You have to okay, enough.
Right, and so where do you see, maybe for yourself or in general, where do you want to? What do you want to do yet in gaming that you haven't had a chance to do, or you want to do more of, or all right, yeah, you did this, but you want to really expand on that, or different, or you mentioned writing. Where do you want to go in the future with this? And I ask myself this question sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is, again, because, and this is something I'm a little jealous of you folks down in the States, is there doesn't seem to be a lot of gaming conventions up here. My brother and I went to one years ago in Toronto called OSR Con. And so, and again, it kind of blows my mind realizing who was there, like Robin D. Laws, Ed Greenwood, Greg Gillespie of Barrow Maze fame. They had flown in Ken St. Andre.
I think it was at Tunnels and Trolls.
Tunnels and Trolls. and then oh shoot, the guy that writes Grognardia was there,
Okay.
and so and this was a small con. We're talking probably less than 50 people. So that was quite amazing, and it went for a couple years and then kind of died out. We went to another one called Breakout just last year, and it's again larger than that one, but still pretty small. So I mean, I wish there were more sort of local conventions around.
Well, and I think there are more down here, but they are more spread out. So, like the nearest one to me is about an hour and 15 minutes away, and there's really nothing up my way. And I live near Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, or at least nothing that I know about. So, maybe that, like I said, maybe with COVID kind of mostly behind us now. So that's what I'm saying. You want to do more face-to-face gaming, or especially
Yeah,
convention gaming.
yeah. I mean, the local libraries asked me, or did at one time, if I
Oh,
would run because I knew them sort of through the school, if I would like to run um,
learn to play.
yeah, or something like that, and I said yes. And actually, I mean, they've never asked again, and like I said, with school, I've been busy. Um, they do run one in a town near me, so I mean, it's something that's done. I often thought I'd like to run a little convention, and again, not a huge one, but something just to kind of because I think people are more open now about it. Like that's the thing I found with the high school, that we had a core group that would show up, but then you get the curious kids that would come in, maybe only sit in a couple sessions, and that was tough because again, you're trying to you tend to be the DM or GM for 10 kids, and it's chaotic, and it's tough for someone that's trying to learn the game. They're only going to get a few seconds maybe of the spotlight. So it would be fun to do something where you could sort of say, no, we're going to have four people at each table, and these are the games. So I've toyed around with that in my mind. Um, I'd love to play. Like I said, I look over at my bookshelf. I've got like I said, DCC. I've got Mercenaries, Spies, and Private Eyes. I've got Low Fantasy Gaming. I've got Call of Cthulhu, Tunnels and Trolls, um, Top Secret. I've got lots of game, and I've kind of said I'm not well. Then I bought that, but I wasn't going to buy any more games until I played more of them. So I think that's one thing I'd like to do is try sort of more systems, and especially games that we hadn't really played as kids or didn't get the chance to play. I'd like to kind of try them. Um, and then I hear, I listen to other podcasts and you hear about these other games, and like I've got Monster of the Week, which is played by or the Apocalypse,
Powered by the Apocalypse. Yeah.
powered by the Apocalypse. So I mean, I've played that at a couple of these conventions. I'd like to try it like with us or another group just to try to see what it's like kind of and kind of get into it for a few sessions and really kind of shake it around and see is it the kind of game that, because some games I think work on doing this kind of Skype thing. Some games I don't think work quite as well. Um, and I do actually in some ways I almost prefer I mean, it would be fun to have a physical group, but there's a lot more sort of work involved with that. Whereas this is nice because 5 minutes before the game starts, we jump online, you run it, and then when you're done, it's kind of
Hmm.
nice. We just say goodbye, and
Yeah.
you're not kind of hanging out for an extra hour while people are falling asleep, or someone has to drive an hour to get home. You know, so. But I think more gaming, like some sort of gaming convention, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to, like we run on Thursday, and I'd like to run maybe for a while during the pandemic. We did that, like on also run something on a Monday. But one of the things is too, I don't want to impose on my players either, so they feel like they have to go. And twice a week could be wearing the same people out. It's almost like I'd need a second group, or and certainly allow the current group if anybody wanted to. But
Well, I think a couple of them already playing a couple times a week.
and they're playing in some other games too. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and that might be something maybe when it turns to winter here in about September. uh, maybe Monday night is a night that we try again. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm going to be off, so it doesn't matter to me. And yeah, I'd like to try maybe something, and something, as you say, that's different. I mean, uh, maybe a Call of Cthulhu or Top Secret, or again a sci-fi game. Um, just something that's completely different than the fantasy game, and give you a chance to play. I mean, I like running too. I do
Hmm.
like jamming, because I get ideas, or and I have to admit, like, you're great because you write the adventures, you do the art. Um, I'm not sure I'm good at that kind. I usually what I do is I find something. Either we'll run. I'm gonna like the Star Frontiers one is a module, so hopefully nobody's played it before. Or can't the nice thing about playing with older players is you can't remember anything anyway.
Right.
Um, and then maybe link stuff, but I don't know. I think again, I find depending on the game system, some ideas are easier to run. Like I think basic fantasy. I imagine Shadow Dark is, where you could just keep throwing things at your players. It's a little easier. I think fantasy's easier
It is.
than sci-fi because you don't.
Because all you need is a location for fantasy.
Yeah, I think that would be something interesting to look at. Is why is sci-fi, or why do I? I mean, I think because I'm not a scientist. I think that's where you have the leg up, or someone like Earl with the engineering. Or I mean, mine would be more Star Wars. Why does that work? It's the Force.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing is, I mean, I'm despite the fact that again, I'm a nerd or a geek. I like Star Wars, but I don't really know a whole lot about the world. I like Star Trek. I don't know a whole bunch about the world. So my big thing is I got to find a generic sci-fi place that you know. And I know you guys wouldn't do it, but I would feel bad if someone's well, you do realize that those aliens actually eat human flesh, and maybe are for and you'd be like, oh, I didn't know that. So I think that's part of it too. I like the generic fantasy stuff because anything can happen, right? And, my drow will be different than your drow, or halflings aren't cute, cuddly things. They're sneaky little, you know, uh,
Kender
uh,
type.
yeah, something like that.
All right. Well, just because I don't want to keep you too long,
Yeah,
and I'll be honest. Oh, some of the live streams when I see they're like 2 hours and 47 minutes, it gets like, oh, I have some other things I need to do today.
yeah.
But any last thoughts?
No, I want to sort of thank you, John, because again, I think, as I said, there are sort of those moments in my gaming history that I can kind of point to and say, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't maybe have gotten into gaming, or I wouldn't have continued into gaming. And you're definitely one of those things in my life. There are people in my life that, if you hadn't sort of reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to play with us?" I don't know if I would have kind of got back into the gaming as much as I have.
Well, thank you,
So
and thank you for bringing your brother along as well. Now, because I got two players for the price of one, one invite, and I got two good regular players.
well, and I know I mean, he jokes. He's often said to me, like, I don't know how you and John do it. Like, I don't know. And it's sort of funny because I keep saying, like, is there something you'd like to run? Because I think that's part of the fun is,
Hmm.
you get an idea and you're like, I want to see how these guys will deal with it. And he's like, I don't know how you do it. And I would say, Matt's way more intelligent and, has that kind of mind. He could do it quite easily. But um, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I know he's thanked me, and he said to me several times, like, "Thank goodness John does this," because he says it's the thing that especially for us. Well, I mean, you'd be the same in Pennsylvania in the winter when it's dark and dreary at 5 o'clock. This is the thing that on Thursday night it's like, okay, that was the thing through the work week that would get me,
Oh yeah,
through the week, right? It's like tonight's Thursday, awesome, you know.
when and you get all the stresses and the nonsense, and it's like this is 2 hours when I don't need to worry about administration or the occasional parent complaint, and not that that's frequent, but you just don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, turn off the real world.
Right. So yeah, so we'll do it again sometime. We'll have to pick a topic, and hopefully that folks on the channel enjoy getting a different perspective instead of just hearing my nonsense all the time.
Well, it's good nonsense.
All right.
It's good.
So I'm going to click off here, and thank you again.
Thank you, John.
All right. And thanks for everybody for watching. Bye-bye.